All right, as I mentioned earlier, my name is Christine Voelker. I am the K-12 Program Director here at Quality Matters, and I am joined today by my colleagues Bethany Simunich and Susie Scheffler.
Hi everyone, I'm Susie Scheffler, the K-12 Program Manager here at Quality Matters. Glad to be here to monitor the chat and help everyone answer any questions for our K-12 community joining us here today.
Okay, and hi everybody, I'm Bethany Simunich, QM's Director of Research and Innovation, and I'm going to approach this like it's a dialogue between you and me and 500 of our closest friends. I'm so excited for all of you to be joining us today. I've been looking at the chat since people started joining, and many of you joined early. I am absolutely amazed at how well you have managed this quick shift to remote teaching. Some of you put basic survival as your accomplishment, and truly that is an accomplishment right now. And then some of you were able to do some fantastic additional things, like I saw student presentations you were doing, or connecting with your educational technologists and instructional designers. Wonderful stuff. So a little bit about me. I used to be a very happy face-to-face faculty member, and then one day they asked me to teach one of my courses online. And probably like some of you, I thought, well, sure, how hard could that be? I get to teach in my pajamas, and I can move my digital materials and put my PowerPoints up, and it's going to be great. And probably like some of you, I quickly learned that I didn't know how to teach well in this new type of modality, in this new type of classroom. And I transferred my materials from my face-to-face class online, but the magic didn't happen. I didn't feel connected to my students. And later, when I got more into faculty development, I kind of learned a primary reason why. It wasn't just that I didn't know enough about how to design an online course well, but I also didn't know how to then effectively teach that well-designed course. So a lot of times when you ask faculty, well, why do you teach the way that you do? One of the most common answers is, we teach how we were taught. But what does that mean if we've never had a really good online course? We don't know how to model those patterns and behaviors and those teaching strategies and methods. So that's some of what we're going to talk about today, moving through some of our struggles and accomplishments in remote teaching, and then really building on that and moving forward to success. So we're going to start first with a poll, and Chris is going to advance it to that slide and open the poll. So we'd love to know who's joining us today, and we did already get your name and your location and everything, but what's your primary role? And I know many of you probably wear many hats. So faculty, instructional designer, educational technologist, administrator, or other. And if it's other, you can go ahead and feel free to type in the chat.
So you should see the poll pop up on your screen. And let me open the chat for you guys.
Okay, so we're getting lots of great comments here. And I know that many of you are faculty just from reading your chat when you first got into the room here. Lots of IDs. Okay, different types of faculty support, some administrators as well. Okay, so all of these different groups, depending on where you fall in that continuum, and it looks like about half of us here today are faculty, about a quarter of us today are instructional designers. One of the champions in moving us to remote teaching, and through that to this bridge to quality. Administrators, thank you so much for joining us today. This really is an important conversation, and I'm so glad you're here for it. And then about 10% of you have other types of roles. Okay, so each of those roles I know presented some unique challenges as we were moving through remote teaching. And we're going to talk about some of those that are really applicable to whatever role that you might hold as a primary at your institution. So let's look at today's roadmap. This is the roadmap that we're going to be using today as we start with any successes or lessons learned from remote instruction. And then we're going to focus on ensuring alignment with foundational design components. And in just a minute, I think Chris is going to advance the slide so you can see the roadmap. I think we're shutting down our poll, and there we go. Okay, so after we move through that, the remote teaching success and We start to focus on that foundational design next, then we're going to talk about engaging students online with this focus on interaction and presence, topics you might have heard a lot about recently. And then finally, we're going to touch on some online policies and practices and considerations that are pretty unique to online learning. So let's get started. So first, let's talk about remote instruction and building on that work. Many of you are probably familiar with Quality Matters Emergency Remote Instruction Checklist, or ERIC as we call it. But if you've not seen this resource, Susie's going to go ahead and post a link to it right now in the chat so that you have it. Okay, so ERIC was broken up into 3 phases, and phase 1 was really designed to attend to those highest priority items during the shift to remote teaching. But in phase 2, however, you hopefully had a bit of a chance to adjust to this new normal, and were then able to connect and engage with your students by interacting online, reinforcing the connections between what they're learning and how they're demonstrating that learning, and by helping students progress via guidance and feedback. Now in phase 3, if there was an opportunity once the class started running more smoothly in the new modality, in phase 3, you were able to create and maybe even find new content, begin to organize your remaining weeks into learning units, into the learning management system, and focus more on active learning and engagement. Additionally, you probably thought more about protecting student data and privacy, and you realized the unique considerations for this online. Okay. So let's pause here a moment because I want to hear from you. What was your biggest challenge while shifting to remote instruction? So aside from the immense difficulties of making a quick pivot from one teaching modality to another, once your remote learning class began, what do you feel was the toughest thing for you and your students? Maybe you felt unsure how to connect with students, or maybe you were unsure how to deliver the information you'd planned for a face-to-face lecture. Maybe there were technology issues, and that could be with technology access or technology skills, or if it was some other aspect that you found most challenging, you can go ahead and type that in the chat. Okay, technology issues, maybe student preparedness. I'm seeing that a lot. Engagement, getting students to complete the work. Assessment, yes, I heard that a lot. Attendance, and that's in quotes, yes. And we're going to talk about that as well. Yes, and other things that were going on. So a number of you are typing that, you know, students had siblings that they were taking care of, or maybe their parents and they had small kids at home and they were completing their education as well. Okay, assessment. Okay, absolutely. So it looks like, all right, about 50% of you felt that engaging students was your biggest struggle when you moved to remote instruction, and that's great because we're going to talk a lot about that today. And coming in second there, it looks like technology issues, about what we would expect. Okay, so we're going to close that poll. Okay, so I'm sure that you've heard this many times over the past month, but remote teaching and learning is not the same as quality online teaching and learning. So if you and your students had some major struggles with remote class, the good news is that's not online learning. So that means that there's a chance to improve and make that a really good learning experience for your students now that perhaps you have more time. So it's good news moving forward because you have this opportunity now to think more deeply about designing your class for online teaching. You might have even heard the term teaching presence, and we'll talk about that more later on in the presentation. But teaching presence doesn't just begin when your class starts, it begins with the design of your course. The biggest mistake that most faculty make when moving from face-to-face teaching to online teaching is simply migrating materials. And as I mentioned, you know, at the opening, that's what I did. I think it's our first instinct, and it really wasn't until the class began that I realized that I couldn't just teach my face-to-face course in this new modality and expect the same quality of learning experience. So all the design work that you do before your class begins includes creating assessments, choosing technology and choosing instructional materials, And online, much of your direct instruction, as well as all the course materials and activities, are created and in the Learning Management System, or LMS, before that class begins. And this ensures that you can spend your time on teaching instead of trying to design while you teach, which many of you had to endure during the remote instruction. Okay, so today we're going to build on those successes and lessons learned and move forward to focus on foundational alignment, then move to engaging our students. And here's the really good news. Designing your course for online or as a hybrid or high flex course is going to provide you with maximized effectiveness in transferring that design to a different modality. For example, courses designed for 100% online can be more easily done as hybrid, especially if you use that flipped pedagogical model, because all of your material will already be in the LMS, so many learning activities then can take place face-to-face, while students still interact with your instructional material online. So if you're unsure what modality you'll be teaching in the fall or even in the summer, you might consider designing your course as a hybrid course that could either be done 100% online or as a traditional hybrid, or as a high flex course where students might have various options for attendance. Okay, so first let's build a good foundation by talking about alignment. If you're teaching a new 100% online course and it begins in a few weeks, this may not be a feasible starting point, but it's still something to consider. And speaking of time to design an online course, industry estimates are about 100 to 200 hours to design and develop a high quality online course. And that time could be impacted if you have help from an ID. That can definitely reduce the time to design, or if, for example, you've already gone through the full design process and this is an existing face-to-face course. You may also have a lot of digital materials and resources and media created, and that could also reduce the time. But if alignment is still your best first step because it provides you with the greatest flexibility for teaching in any modality. When there are alignment issues in our course design, it's much more difficult to do design tweaks or transfer your learning units, as things tend to break apart and connections get lost when we try to move those course components that are not fully and optimally connected from one modality to the other. So finally, focusing on foundational design means you are putting pedagogy before technology, and that is the best thing to do online, rather than letting technology guide your design and teaching options. Now, alignment is a concept that all of the critical course elements work together to ensure that learners meet your desired learning outcomes. It's a primary component of an instructional design model called backward design, and many of you are probably already familiar with this. In essence, you begin with the end in mind, or where you want your students to be in terms of their learning by the end of the course. Those desired results are your course learning objectives or outcomes, as the exact term might vary by institution. But next, you determine what students should do in order to provide you with evidence that they've achieved your learning objectives. And finally, you craft the learning experience and choose your instructional strategies by finding and creating instructional materials and deciding on your active learning and teaching strategies. Having a well-aligned course means students won't be complaining about busy work or wondering why they're reading a text or completing a certain assignment, because everything is focused on them achieving your objectives. Okay, it's poll time. So I'd like to hear from you how you traditionally evaluate alignment in your course. So maybe you always use an alignment map at the end to assess, and I'm guessing a lot of our IDs are going to make that choice here in the poll. It could be something that you consider, but you don't have a formal step to evaluate it after you design your course. Or maybe it's a newer concept for you, or it's something that you really hadn't purposefully considered before. There's also another option there, and I think you know the process right now. Please feel free to type in the chat if you have more to tell us. Yes, Aaron, we can repost that link to Eric at the end of the webinar, so no worries there. Okay, so I see that some of you are using a course design or alignment map. based on the QM rubric. That's fantastic. Some use it as self-guide. Some of you have some of these resources as well, but it seems like maybe all your faculty aren't engaging with them at this time. Okay. And I got a shout out for DFink. Thanks, Gary. Yes, think significant learning experiences. Okay, so let's look and see what the poll says. About half of you use an alignment map at the end to assess. That is fantastic. And if you're already doing that, you know that that works no matter what modality you're designing your course for, whether it's face-to-face, online, or hybrid. And many of you are, you know, something that you consider or it's on your radar, but maybe not something that you regularly do. Okay. And I do have a couple people here asking what an alignment map is and all those good things, and we can definitely share out those resources. Okay, so in general, just very quickly to orient you to some of this lingo, an alignment map is really where you kind of map out your whole course, and it's best done as an after activity. So you align as you're designing, but at the end, you really kind of check that alignment and you map all of your things back to your learning objectives. And we're kind of going to talk through that in the next couple slides. Okay, so we know that alignment is important, and it's important to point out that alignment is not a new idea or concept, but a foundational one. And I'll be honest with you, designing an aligned course is hard work. When I was working in faculty development, I used to say that alignment is easy to understand, but difficult to achieve. Even for my own courses, I design with alignment in mind, but I always have some changes and considerations to deal with when I check my final design using an alignment map. Without alignment, however, students may spend their time in ways not focused on course objectives, including interacting with material that we never ask them to apply, or completing an assignment that only partially enables them to show evidence of their learning. Online design, though, is unique. And we're going to go to the next slide where we talk about how we have to consider interaction. It expands the idea when we design for online, it expands this idea of alignment to include interaction and technology. Now, these are also things that you might consider in your face-to-face course design as well, but face-to-face can still be done pretty well without these additional considerations, whereas online learning really cannot. Face-to-face interaction might happen organically or it might be planned, but even if it's the latter, it's not the degree of planning it would take to do that interaction activity well online. So here's where we look at our learning activities and consider how students will interact and apply what they're learning. Additionally, we need to choose the technology and tools that support our objectives and assessments, and not just use a tool because it's popular or new or widely used. And I'm looking at you, discussions, because you're not always the best choice. So when we start to move through and ensure alignment, the first step out, through remote instruction is this focus. So first you'll examine the overall outcomes of the course and ensure that they describe objectives that are measurable. Now, if they're institutionally mandated objectives and they're not measurable, that's okay. In order to move forward with your design, you can simply reconceptualize them for yourself using active verbs that describe what your students will do, such as discuss, apply, or analyze. Next, look at your formative and summative assessments, as each one should have an aligned connection to one or more of your course learning objectives. Okay, and on the next slide there, you can see most of the QM higher education rubric standards that focus on alignment, beginning with your course objectives, then following through to your assessments, and then connecting to your learning activities. And one note here, the standards that we're going to be showing on the screen are from the Quality Matters higher education rubric, but when those things differ from the K through 12 rubric, Susie's going to type those things in the chat. So for those of you that are from K-12, you can follow along very handily. Okay, so learning activities online not only support learners to meet the desired learning outcomes, they also have many instructional connections that help learners make sense of why they're completing the activities. Tied to any online learning activity are two critical components: instructional materials and technology. Without either, the learning activity is difficult to complete online. And that's why these two standards are kind of bundled together and appear after the learning activities in terms of alignment. Learning activities are what most of you probably think of when you think of your course, what learners will do during the course to learn concepts and develop new neural pathways. They're also the primary way that we engage students through interaction and application, which is a topic that we'll talk about next. So thinking about learning activities leads us right into a good discussion about engagement, interaction, and presence. For our purposes today, I'd like you to think of engagement in terms of cognitive engagement, which really does provide the spark or fuel for learning. It's through application of newly acquired knowledge and skills, as well as interacting with materials, the instructor, peers, etc., that cognitive engagement happens. So we're going to pause here because we have a poll, and I'd like to hear from you. When do you typically consider engagement? Is it when you're designing your materials, your assessments? Maybe it's when you're choosing technology, or it could be something that you're doing as the class is running. Maybe it's all of the above. And again, if you have anything else to add, please go ahead and pop it into the chat. Looks like we have the wrong poll up, Chris. Yes, we're going to switch out the poll. Okay, so if you'd like, you can even
Sorry about that.
oh, yes, and I'm muted. Yes. Okay, we have the right. Okay, go ahead and type your choice in the chat. I think we're having a problem with the poll. Not a problem though. You can just type it in the chat. And what I was saying when I forgot to unmute myself was that I will tell you what I tell all of my students when the online class begins, when I teach, and that is we will have technology problems, and that's okay. We'll get through them together.
Are you guys you're not seeing the right poll?
No, we're seeing the alignment poll, Chris.
When do you consider alignment?
Yes, don't worry about it though, it's okay.
Isn't that
All right, so I see most of you are saying in the chat, all of the above, all of the above, all of the above. Yes, okay, and some of you actually do see the engagement poll. Okay, all right, so we're gonna move on from the problematic poll, okay? And we're going to go ahead and close that out. And Chris, go ahead and just move to the next slide for engaging students. So it looks like a lot of you already are considering all the different ways that we have to engage students and all the different times along our course design process where we have to consider engagement, okay? So as I mentioned earlier, though, your teaching begins with the design of your course, but so does students' motivation to engage with materials and concepts. It's through our design choices that we can elevate or not cognitive presence and engagement. So as you design, consider assessments that stretch students' learning, but also provide safety nets as they progress via formative assessments and knowledge checks. Also, you might do an assessment audit and see the breadth and depth of opportunities that students have to actually apply what they're learning, preferably through authentic assessments. Finally, consider ways to get students to become more self-directed learners through reflective assignments or interactive activities. So it's easier to design for passive learning, and it's easier on students to do passive learning, but designing a course without active learning really doesn't enhance learning and doesn't get us the cognitive engagement that our students need to really master this material and move it from their working memory into their long-term memory. So let's move on now and talk about interaction as one way to really elevate that engagement. If you're already familiar with QM standards, you know that we talk about interaction as happening in 3 different ways. Students interacting with one another, students interacting with course materials, and then your interaction with students. Learner-learner interaction may be impacted by things such as class size or discipline, but students will always interact with materials and with you. And again, with online, your plan for interacting with your online students is something that needs to be considered and created before the course begins and as part of your design. Okay, so this displays the model and the framework of community of inquiry. And I'm sure many of you have heard about presence or the community of inquiry, but you may not have seen the full model. We don't have time to dive into the full model today, but it does provide a framework for how the educational experience happens online through interaction and engagement and the intersection of teaching presence, social presence, and cognitive presence. And again, presence is something that must be purposefully designed into an online course in thoughtful ways. The three types of presence correspond very well actually to the three types of interaction that we spoke about just a bit ago. So let's examine each aspect a bit more closely, beginning with teaching presence. Teaching presence begins with design and extends through delivery. Why doesn't it just speak to the act of teaching though that occurs once your online course is running? Well, because design includes the selection, the organization, and the primary presentation of course content, as well as all that design and development of learning activities and assessments. So when your students enter your online course on day one, they already have a very strong sense of who you are as an instructor and what the class will focus on based on the material that you've chosen, the activities that you've created, and how you've chosen to organize them online into a learning path with logical and efficient navigation. Once the course begins, however, since the design is done, you can then focus your time on interacting with and guiding students via feedback, check-ins and office hours, announcements, and more. Okay, on the next slide, you're going to see some of the related Quality Matters higher education rubric design standards that are related to teaching presence. So again, teaching presence consists of design, facilitation, and direction or direct instruction. It's also, though, the unifying force that really brings together the social presence and the cognitive presence portions of this framework. On this slide, you can see some of the standards that elevate teaching presence, such as laying out the course and providing structure to the learning environment, sharing your plan with interacting with students, and then also your welcoming message that introduces you to students and lets them know what they can expect from you. Next, let's focus on social presence because this is crucial for your students. It's what allows them to feel part of an online learning community rather than simply being a participant in a remote class, which can feel both physically and psychologically disconnected and distant. Here's where your design choices really can heighten interaction and presence by focusing on quality interaction between peers early on, so that they can develop the trust and create the rapport necessary to develop that sense of community. Your teaching presence is really a catalyst here, as you can promote social presence by helping students establish and maintain their connection to your learning community. The QM rubric standards shown here are examples of design that can elevate social presence. For example, you might begin with a student introduction via the discussion board and continue that interaction then in individual or group ways via learning activities that support active learning and engagement. Additionally, it's vital to include opportunities for online students to check their learning progress, because it's often the only way you and your students know that they're getting it. Online, you can't see a classroom of confused faces that tell you to circle back and provide more explanation or examples for a course topic. So it's vital that students have low-stakes opportunities to check their learning progress and that those opportunities be appropriately timed and sequenced so that they can use your feedback to improve their future performance. Finally, we turn our attention to cognitive presence, which really focuses on that quality cognitive engagement that we talked about earlier. To really elevate this element of the framework, you might consider sparking that intellectual curiosity from day one by introducing learning units with something called essential questions, and that's also part of the backward design instructional design model. These are big questions that promote cognitive inquiry and invite students to that unit's topic, and can even provide them with some internal motivation for learning. Again, your teaching presence can elevate or diminish cognitive presence and engagement. So be sure to share with students your passion for the topic, as well as why those course topics might be relevant to their personal lives or their current or future professional lives. In your feedback and interaction with students, model the learning behaviors that you wish by encouraging them to make connections, ask questions, and reflect on their knowledge gains. Shown here are several QM rubric standards that promote cognitive presence and engagement, as these are all focused on application, sequenced and varied learning activities, and using technology and tools wisely to support engaged and active learning. One thing to keep in mind pertaining to choosing the technology and tools that best support your pedagogical goals is to calculate into the workload of the course the time that students will need to spend to learn that new technology. So this is one reason why common or low-tech options might be especially appealing right now. Our own cognitive load, as well as that of our students, is probably at an all-time high. So consider technology wisely. And if you or your students should best spend their time applying their new knowledge via activities and assessments or learning a new technology and tool. Now shown here on this slide are some common LMS tools as well as other types of technology that can help to elevate presence, interaction, and engagement. I'd like you to think about the new opportunities that the online learning environment might afford you and your students, because these are all wonderful ways to connect and engage digitally, some of which aren't available to us in face-to-face teaching. So just to talk about these a little bit, because a lot of these have corollaries to things that you may already be very comfortable doing face-to-face. So for example, we're going to go back to the previous slide there for a second, Chris. So for example, at the top there, you see journals, and journals is a very common tool in the LMS. It usually defaults to a private reflective journal. Journals are great to use for reflective activities. They're also a great stand-in if face-to-face you do things like muddiest point or 1-minute papers. But if you're a fan of having students reflect on where they are in their learning, journals are a great tool to use. You can have them check their knowledge gains, and it's also a way for you to really develop a connection with your students individually. Wikis can be done very well and easily for group work, and your LMS may have a wiki. You may also be able to use Google Docs or Google products for that as well. Blogs can be something that you do individually or as a course. Discussions are something very popular, of course, online, but the trick for online discussions is doing them well. And if you're interested in doing discussions well, Quality Matters definitely has some professional development on that. There's also ways to use synchronous collaboration tools for interaction and engagement. So even if you're teaching 100% online asynchronously and you have those office hours that you're holding via synchronous tools, you could use those in targeted ways, for example, by talking about an upcoming large assignment and potentially even recording that and then posting that in the class. Finally, I wanted to mention Screencast, which is my favorite way actually to provide feedback to my online students. So for example, I will bring a paper up and I can talk through that paper and say, I see what you were doing here, and I can highlight some things there, but they can hear the supportive tone in my voice as well. And sometimes that really is something that provides that deeper connection to students online. Okay, so we're going to finish today by talking about additional considerations and next steps, because there's some unique considerations for online learning. So let's go ahead into our final poll. Which of the following did you have to consider in a new way while teaching remotely? And there's some options there. And of course, you can also use the chat. And it looks as though we do have the right poll up this time. Okay. We made it through the hump of some technology problems. All right, so go ahead and take a moment and make your selection. So for example, you may have been looking at material that you wanted to include in your online class, and you started thinking in new ways about accessibility. I know a lot of you had mentioned that you had issues with technology. Okay, and in the chat here, I'm seeing some all of the aboves: accessibility, technology. Some students not having access to appropriate technology. Absolutely, that was a big thing. Yes, students trying to take their course on a mobile device, and sometimes our courses are not optimized for students taking them on a mobile device. Issues with attendance, okay. Availability. All right, and then some unique considerations, like if you had Lab instruction, absolutely. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what that poll shows us. Okay, so over half of you said all the above. And even though I'm sure many of you were thrown into this, it seems like you quickly realize that this is a new modality, a new landscape, new classroom, whatever you want to call it, but there are some unique considerations here. Okay. So we're going to move on to the next slide, and shown here are some policies that might be different or even new for online courses and students versus face-to-face. For example, you may have already had to consider how students should be present online, including how frequently they should log into the course. You can even help this along by designing smaller formative assessments during the week and a more summative assessment due on the weekend, so that your design actually encourages students to log in early and complete that first activity. You've likely also had to consider unique student data and privacy concerns, such as those encountered with using synchronous technologies or proctored testing, perhaps. Additionally, accessibility of materials is vital online, and thankfully, there is a lot of wonderful content that we can select for use in our online classes that is already accessible. You may also have had to consider copyright issues for online material, as well as technology and tech skills that your students need. And for all of these considerations, your best first step is to connect with your local institutional support office so that they can best inform and guide you for any institutional policies, as well as institutionally approved and supported technologies. Okay. So we did leave time here for Q&A, but I hope that you were able to pick up at least one new idea or strategy today. And moving forward, you might first consider how much time you have to design your online or hybrid course, as well as what modality your institution may be encouraging for summer or fall. If time permits, your best first step is always to ensure alignment before moving forward with elements that allow for engagement and presence opportunities for your students. Again, connect with your instructional designers and your DL offices for more direct help, as well as your centers for teaching and learning, who already know all about great foundational design. For those of you that really heard about topics that you would like to do a deeper dive in, we also do have some really wonderful professional development packages that we've put together for institutions that are moving from remote teaching towards quality online learning. So Susie's going to go ahead and pop information about that in the chat if you're interested. Also, just to let you know and to reiterate, you will be emailed a link next week that will have the recording for this presentation. We are also working to complete a companion document to the emergency remote instruction checklist that really closely follows the presentation today and will be released later this month, so that hopefully you can use that moving forward in your bridge to quality. So I'm now turning it over and opening it up the floor, and we're going to look at the Q&A. I see that we already have about 20 questions waiting there.
There's a bunch of questions in the Q&A, and one of them talked about how, and I apologize for looking at my other screen because that's where my questions are, how you got the poll to work in this Zoom meeting. Cool feature for synchronous learning. So the poll feature is something that I believe you can use in Zoom meeting and also Zoom webinar. It's something that you actually have to set up on the back end. So prior to when you set up your meeting, for example, in Zoom or the webinar, there is one of the tabs says polls, and you can create those polls. And then if you're the host, you're able to then pull up the polls and select the one that you've done. You can do multiple questions on one poll. It's just kind of easier to do one question at a time. And then you can publish the results, and you can leave the poll up for as long as you need. But yeah, we wanted to show that that was an easy way to build engagement within those synchronous pieces that you might be doing.
Yes, absolutely. Brian asked, can we use these slides to educate our online faculty? Absolutely. Anybody can watch the recording of this presentation. So when you are sent the recording link, you can absolutely share that with others.
And Bethany, there's a lot of questions in the chat about HyFlex. Yes. I'm wondering if you can talk more about that.
So HyFlex is actually not a brand new idea, but it is right now a very big idea. It's a type of course or type of course design that allows individual students to choose whether they want to attend class online or in person. And this may vary on a daily basis. So let's say, for sake of example, that you have an instructor that is holding the course face-to-face. That course might simultaneously be streamed so that students could attend that from home. And this course, that presentation would also be recorded and then posted in the LMS, so students that wanted to attend asynchronously, for example, could watch the recording. So it doesn't happen in the same way at every institution, but I think it's a hot topic for discussion right now because a lot of institutions are considering how to do that or whether to do that for summer and fall, because again, it provides that maximum flexibility for students who may or may not be returning to campus or who need to take courses in different ways. So I expect you'll hear a lot more about HyFlex, and that's HYFLEX is how it's spelled. And there's definitely some good information that is out there on that and more that's starting to come out.
Thanks, Bethany. Yeah, I've been seeing a lot more about that too, and a lot of people asking questions about that. So I appreciate your answer there. There is another question here about a link to the research about the amount of time involved in designing an online course.
Yeah. So Susan,
you probably have some answers for that.
Susan, that is one of those factoids that have stuck in my mind ever since I actually, did a deep dive into that research. I do not recall off the top of my head because that really is more of an industry estimate than something that has been researched. For those of you, though, that have designed high quality classes, for example, those that have met standards in a formal QM review, or for those of you that are instructional designers, and you can go ahead and reinforce that in the chat, I think that's a reasonable estimate. Even for myself, who's, and I design all of my own classes and I've kind of worked out that time, especially if I take away those hours for things that gave me a jump start, like if I was starting in the template that gave me some good organization to design within, that definitely is on par with about the amount of time. Kate, you asked about the roadmap link. That's do you mean the link for this presentation or the link for the companion document? If you mean the companion document, QM is going to release that later this month. We don't yet have that available. Okay. Adriana, you're asking about tools and suggestions for alignments. I want to just say QMPD because it's definitely all focused on alignment. But definitely if you wanted to get started with an alignment map, even if you did a quick Google search, there are some free maps that are available. QM also has some that they use within their professional development. At the very least, you can just simply make a very simple table within Word and start to map back your assessments to your course learning objectives and begin there. Kimberly asked, would you need a, let's see, wait, the question went away. Would you need a measurable product or assignment for objectives that begin with analyze? Yeah, because you really want to see that students had the opportunity to actually analyze something and they completed that analysis at the level of mastery that you were looking for. This is a very good question. Katie's asking, in an online synchronous environment, how often would you recommend that students interact with instructors, like your polls? Well, very good question. I think that it somewhat depends on how that class is structured and your other teaching strategies. So for example, if I'm doing synchronous teaching and maybe I designed it as using the flipped pedagogical model. So we even have a workshop on this, doing flipped synchronous is how I'm thinking about it right now. Such that your students engage with material outside of class online in the LMS, and then they're focused on that active dialogue and conversation and application when they're with you in that synchronous environment. You may not have to do as many polls, but if you're really using that synchronous time to perhaps deliver a lecture, a poll is a great way to kind of break that up because the brain needs breaks, right? So it's one way even to kind of creatively chunk your longer lectures into digestible chunks for our brains, our students' brains, and then have them take that poll. And you can even gear those questions towards something that would ask them to apply what you just talked about. You might, for example, include an example or scenario based on what you just lectured about in a synchronous session, and then have a poll that's essentially a multiple choice question that asks them to apply something from what you just spoke about within that scenario. Carolyn's asking for slides. So we're definitely going to share the recording of this, and that will include the slides. Yes. Okay.
You know, Bethany,
Yeah.
I'd like to add something to the engagement piece in synchronized. You know, when you're teaching synchronously with your students. The other thing that I've seen to be pretty successful is when you're using something like maybe a Padlet where they can all communicate at the same time, or a Google Doc where they can all communicate at the same time. It's just a little bit tricky, and it just, you know, it just takes a little bit of time to get the hang of it, to get to kind of modeling for your students, you know, how they're going to have to go out of wherever you're presenting and open up another tab or something like that. But you can also share your screen then and show it in real time how the students are, you know, coming up with their answers. So that's another thing that you could play around with. Also things like Pear Deck, where or Edpuzzle, where you can incorporate quizzes and different checks for understanding within your slides and your lessons.
Absolutely. Okay. Okay, so Anna's asking about journals. Anna, can you type your question in a different way in the chat? I'm not quite understanding your question there for how to make submit check journals. If you're asking about, you know, how to create a journal as an assignment type, it is a tool type in most learning management systems. In the LMSs that I'm familiar with, it defaults to a private journal. So it's just interaction between you and that individual student. And it really is used well and best, I think, for reflective activity. Nice way to, if you're a fan of Kolb's learning cycle, nice way to close that cycle of learning. Okay, Laura's asking, how do you handle the accessibility component of recorded messages with screencast? That's a very important question. In part, it may depend on the students that you have in your class, and that is you know, a risk and consideration for anything that you want to do synchronously. Technically, you want to do as we did today and really have that live captioning. There are things, though, that you can do to help all of your students. So, for example, if you're making a presentation, you may want to script that out and then provide that as, you know, a takeaway transcript resource to students after the fact, so they can really focus on, you know, the moment and engaging with you in that moment, but they will still have that record. And then students also that are deaf or hard of hearing would also have that. But technically, yes, you do want to have live captions. You can, if it's something that you're not doing synchronously, you can record something, get the captions added, and then you can put that in your course. Beth is asking, how do your students like getting feedback by screencast? I would think it might be harder to capture all the points you're trying to make versus having written comments. Actually, I've gotten nothing but kudos for it. And I hear the same from faculty everywhere. I think really students are hungry to make that connection with us. They miss us as much as we miss them when we don't design these opportunities for us to engage with one another into our online courses. And truthfully, I want them to hear my voice, because if I wrote down, you know, a set of feedback and I gave it to 5 different students to read, they would all read a different tone into that. And really that's important, because I want students to know that I'm supporting them in their work. So I think it's easier. It's easier for me. It takes less time, and I've really gotten nothing but positive feedback from students. But it's a very important point to consider, Beth. And you might try it once with your students, and then ask them how it worked out or what their preference is. Karen's asking about an alignment map. I think that you can get some basic ones from Googling. Those of you that are QM members, you likely already have access to an alignment map that you can use and fill in. Okay, Brittany's asking about definitions. Remote learning actually is not a brand new term, and that's something that I learned during this transition as well. I had never really heard of it. So remote learning in general refers to any learning that's done remotely, and that could be a correspondence type course. It could be, you know, true online learning or hybrid, but really it's kind of changed in definition during this quick shift to remote instruction. And we specifically use the term remote instruction, remote teaching, remote learning in order to differentiate it from the quality online learning and teaching that we talk about. So for those of, I mean, I've been in online learning now exclusively for about 15 years. And for those of us that have really dedicated our careers to this, we are itching to help all of you that are still in that remote instruction place and struggling. There are ways to do online well. And if there's one thing that you take away today, please let it be that remote instruction is not good online learning, but you can do good online learning, and it starts with the design. Okay, and we're running a little bit short on time, so I'm going to scroll here and try to pick out some questions for topics that we didn't talk about. Cheryl's asking, we've discovered the need to teach our first-time online learners to be online learners. Any thoughts on building that into a course or pre-course? Absolutely. I think one of the best things that institutions can do right now is to have an online student orientation to help prepare students to be successful online learners. So whether it's something that your institution creates on their own or something that they call together from different pieces and parts, because there's lots of good student readiness and orientations out there. It's really important because it's a different set of skills that students need to be successful online, just like faculty need a different set of skills to be successful as online instructors. Absolutely, good questions. Trying to, oh, there's so many good questions. Oh my gosh. Okay, so, one question here I can answer. What is a screencast? A screencast is something where it's a piece of software, and there's web-based software. You may have a tool that your institution uses. Screencast-O-Matic is one. Your institution may have something like Kaltura. There's a bunch of different options, but essentially a screencast records everything that's on your screen, including your mouse movements and your voice. So it's a really great tool to show students a process, or a diagram, or as I mentioned, to provide feedback, because you can really gesture and show things on the screen while also talking through it. No, Anna, I don't meet with students to give feedback. I record the feedback via a screencast, and then they're sent that file. Yeah, good question.
Right, so you're commenting, like, you may have like circled a certain part of their sentence that you're commenting on, and you can make the comment right there.
Yes. I'm seeing a number of questions here asking about, does QM host webinars for members that introduce faculty to the QM rubric, or a few of you that asked, you know, can QM help to have that conversation with your administrators? Absolutely. We definitely have some pathways and options for that. Right now, what I'm going to do is I will type my email into the chat box. So for those of you that are looking for something like that, maybe somebody to help to facilitate a conversation with your administrators or do some dedicated PD or anything, please reach out to me and I can help connect you with the right people at QM. Okay, we are just about out of time.
We have
Marcia,
about 4 minutes left.
The question on backward design, I definitely recommend the actual book that's from, Understanding by Design, and there's a companion workbook that includes all sorts of amazing and wonderful templates and forms. So there's a lot there with backward design, and I believe there's also an alignment map in at least one of the books. There's a book, there's a workbook, and then there's another book that I have, but I forget.
It's Wiggins and McTighe.
Yes. Okay. I think that's okay.
I saw some questions about, for example, the platform Edgenuity. Edgenuity has courses, and Edgenuity actually has some Quality Matters certified courses, and that's a good question. If you're looking to purchase content or packages of courses that are already put together, and a lot of times we see this in K-12, you can go on the Quality Matters website, and we actually have a course search. So you can search and you can look to see what courses have been certified. You can see what schools and districts and institutions have certified courses. You can see what vendors have certified QM courses. You can also search by discipline, so that if you're looking to maybe purchase a course and you want to make sure that it has gone through that rigorous review, you can take a look there and do a search and see what vendors actually have QM certified courses. And
on
you can
that note,
also become a certified QM reviewer if you have not done so. So we always welcome people to do that. It's a great opportunity to see other courses and also give back and really help the community with maybe what has worked for you, and really share your expertise in good course design, because in becoming a certified QM reviewer, you'll learn how to apply our rubric and really give good, helpful, solid feedback.
Absolutely. And I'm gonna end with one big tip. There is a search tool that's on the QM website, and if you search for things like alignment map or examples of you know, feedback or formative assessments or learning activities, you're likely to pull up a lot of good conference presentations or maybe recordings from some past QM success stories. A couple of you asked for other free webinars that are coming up, so QM always hosts things like QM success stories. We recently had one that was a free webinar. It was great. It was on discussions. So definitely be on the lookout for those. If you're not already signed up to receive QM emails, definitely swing around to our website. And Susie, would you be able to show the link for the QM website in the chat there, please? And that will allow you to sign up and get our emails so that you'll always know when we're hosting a free webinar, and hopefully you can attend and I'll see you again. I want to thank all of you so much for taking time out of your busy day, because I know how busy you are. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. You were great participants. You really participated in those polls and you gave us feedback, and
They really were.
I'm so impressed. I'm so impressed from all the things that you talked about in the beginning, all of your accomplishments and successes, and for
Be
how
proud of yourself. You've
Yep.
really done an amazing job.
Yeah. And we're going to bridge to quality together. So we are here for you. Please reach out if there's anything that we can help with after the webinar. And again, you will receive an email next week that has the recording to this. So hopefully I will see you again in a future QM webinar. But with that, I'm signing off, and thank you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone. There's a verification of attendance here at the end if you need to take a screenshot of that. And you will also see that you attended in the MyQM tool.
Absolutely.
Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.